Hi, this is Mike Smith. In this video, I'm going to run through how you could use WordPress for a full marketing and sales platform, and also a learning management system or membership platform. So I'm going to have a quick look at the entire components and tools that you might need to build this. And it's represented in this diagram, which looks a little complicated, but it's based on a basic sales process built out with nurturing funnels, and it's also based on WordPress, which is a content management system. And at its very basis, it manages content in the form of pages and posts, but it can do so much more than that. So starting from this, and from this we are going to build up to this. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so because this video is aimed at developers but also site owners, let's start from the very beginning, and this video is an overview. I have another video which goes through all of this in much more detail, but let's start from the very beginning, which is WordPress. And WordPress, what is that? Okay, WordPress is a content management system for web pages. So it allows people to edit and publish HTML content, which is technical word for web pages. And to do that, it requires hosting and a database that's part of the system. And the major functions are publishing content in the form of pages and posts. And for now, we won't worry too much about the difference between those, as well as some kind of navigation system that allows you to go between pages and posts. And also some way of editing that content, and also some way of controlling who can edit that content. So we've got HTML, edit, publish, and roles and permissions, a navigation function, and the output is pages and posts. And the storage is a database which is hosted somewhere. So that's a simple overview of WordPress. Now, the cool thing about WordPress is that its architecture allows you to expand the capabilities, and so many people have expanded the capabilities of WordPress so that it is no longer just a simple blogging platform. So let's have a look at how that's done. What this diagram shows is an extension to two aspects of the WordPress content management system. Firstly, the types of content, and then also the concept of metadata attached to the content as well as to the users. And without getting into too much detail, what this allows is for more different types of content. For example, you might be wanting testimonials and reviews and guest articles to be added to your post. So that involves more users with different roles, having different capabilities and permissions on your website. And then from there we might want to actually sell something, so we're going to add an e-commerce function and sell products. And examples of those products might be cars and houses, so that it's not just a price of a product, but the cars and the houses are a good example of content that requires extra information. You know, how not just the price of the car, but the model, the make, and the odometer reading and the year. Houses, for example, how many rooms, garages, bathrooms, floor space, levels, all of this extra information which wasn't really needed when you were just looking at pages and posts. And so for these things we add extra information to these, what I refer to as custom posts, and that extra information is called metadata. And while we're at it, we also add metadata, extra fields, to the users function. So for example, with guest articles, we want guest writers, and they will need specific permissions, and their permissions to create guest articles is contained in what's called the user meta. When it comes to extending this further, a good example might be wanting to deliver lessons in the form of course content. And so when we get to that sort of capability, we want to keep track of which lessons, for example, a user may have completed and which they haven't. And that is also stored in metadata for the user. So that shows an overview of how the basic WordPress content management system can be extended for custom post types as well as metadata on both the users as well as the content. And as you can see, we have extended the capability of WordPress significantly already, from this type of architecture to this. And we can go even further. So for example, if we wanted to employ marketing techniques and methods to increase our sales, to make the sales process work more effectively, then we can add functions to WordPress to do that. And if we wanted to keep track of our users a little bit more carefully, to see, for example, what their history on the website is, which pages they've visited, which products they've purchased, which lessons, courses that they've enrolled in, and also periodically contact those users using some kind of automation. Well, we can definitely do that as well. So the WordPress architecture starts to look a little bit like this, where we've got, for example, protected content. We've got a customer resource management tool with some automation, tag-based functionality, allowing us to track and trigger from events, and overall some kind of sales process for our products to allow us to present good visuals and copy to increase sales, so that the WordPress content management system can now be a quite effective sales platform for products, simple products, complex products, as well as function as a learning management system. So let's see how that can be built. Before we go any further, we will need to review basic sales methodology and theory, and also want to mention that some of the functions that I'm talking about here can be either provided through cloud-based services external to WordPress, but more recently they are also available as plugins within WordPress. And there are reasons for doing it in either way. But mostly I'm going to focus on keeping everything within the content management system, because that seems to be most useful to the kinds of clients that I'm working with. So let's get started next then with a quick overview of marketing and sales. Okay, so marketing and sales, and this is a brief overview and also an overview which focuses on our area of interest, which is building the website itself and the functions that that are contained within the website. So I've got a cloud here which covers lead qualifying, advertising, seminars, social media, and obviously for people who come from the marketing area, this should all be expanded out and explained more fully. But for our purposes, I'm going to consider that lead qualifying is just a collection of activities that sends traffic to a web page, effectively, which we will call a landing page. Now, most websites will have at least one landing page, and the most obvious landing page will be the home page. So typically customers would, or potential customers would, initially land on the home page. But if you were focusing on selling a particular product, that might have its own landing page. And an example of that might be a course, for example, has its own landing page. Or if you had a featured product that you wanted to direct people's attention to, then you might construct a landing page specifically for that. And then good design on that landing page would dictate that it has a very clear call to action. What I'm referring to here is good visuals and copy, so that the landing page isn't just a product page in e-commerce terms, for example. It's a properly designed, persuasive piece of text with a clear call to action, which might be to purchase a product, or it might be to contact the business owner, whatever that call to action is. And the purpose of this landing page with its call to action is to make an offer. And that offer probably maps to a product or a bundle of products. One of the key functions of this setup is to at least capture that lead, so that that lead can be put into a lead nurture process, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail. So you've got a flow diagram here. Traffic comes to the landing page, call to action combination, an offer is made, and the visitor can either decide yes or no. If they decide no, then at the very least we want to capture their details, which typically means their email address, and put that on a list. And that list is represented here by this box called the lead nurture process, whatever that may be. And then from there we may send them back to the call to action, or we may put them back into this process of lead further qualifying. If they decide to take the offer, then there's a couple of things that should happen in a good marketing strategy. Firstly, of course, there should be a robust sales process for managing that sale, and then ideally some kind of after sales process and a client nurturing process. And I'm using the word nurture here as well as here, basically to mean that we want something more for this client who has purchased something. We also hope to have more contact with this potential lead. So the nurture process tends to look like a sequence of actions that might get in contact with that customer or lead more. And that might take the form of an email sequence or phone calls or whatever the business deems most appropriate. Going back to this offer here, if the offer is accepted, then one of the keys to marketing is that further offers are made. We don't just leave them with that offer. And that is referred to as upsells and downsells and cross-sells. So that once we have a client in our system, we are making them aware that we have other things that we can offer them. So there's a looping process here for our existing clients, and that looping function is a little difficult to build within WordPress without the assistance of a specialist plugin, which I'll mention in a moment. But overall, from the perspective of a website builder, this is a reasonable, simple overview of the marketing and sales process. So if this is a very basic website focused look at marketing, let's now look at how that can be mapped to the different functions within a content management system like WordPress. So here's that diagram relabeled with some of the functions uh, also labeled to see, okay, so which function within WordPress would do this and which function would do that. So I've used color coding here to indicate four main functions that will have been added to the basic WordPress. So some kind of e-commerce function, and that would be most likely WooCommerce, some kind of sales flow function, and that could be WP funnels or cart flows. Those are very common sales flow funnels plugins. And then some kind of CRM, that's the client or customer relationship management tool with email capabilities, and also some automation. And candidates for that are Groundhog, WP Fusion, and a couple of other options there as well. Tying all this together is an automation function, and there are various candidates for that, including Uncanny Automator, WP Automator, and so on. So these are the specialist functions that are added to a basic WordPress installation that allow us to address the needs of a sales process. And so the color coding maps to the components in the diagram that we saw before. Now there is a bit of overlap because we have a dedicated automation function here, but each of these other major functions, e-commerce, sales flow, and CRM, also have their own kind of built-in automation as well. So these boxes can be a little fuzzy, but hopefully this will allow you to kind of keep track of what's doing what in the WordPress installation. So for example, the lead capture and the lead nurture, after sales process, client nurture process after sales, that's managed by the CRM. The persuasive text and the copy on the landing page and the flow from one page to another as part of the sales process, well, that's shown here in blue, and we'll see how that expands in a moment in more detail. And of course, e-commerce is looking after the actual products or the offers here, managing financial transactions and purchases within the WordPress site. But just sort of bearing in mind that there is overlap between these boxes here. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at the basic sales process and how that builds up so that we can make sense of that complex diagram that we saw at the very beginning. So even this diagram, which is relatively simple, kind of looks a little complicated already and difficult to understand. Let's go back to a basic sales process, something that is traditionally understandable. Say, for example, you go into a bookshop, you buy a book. What does that sales process look like? So we still have the lead qualifying, so that bookshop may have advertising, they may have a social media presence. And all of that is designed to send traffic to the main offer, which in this case would be people walking into the bookshop, in the sense of a physical bricks and mortar type bookshop. And this box here, which represents the main offer. Okay, so you've got a book that you want to purchase. If you don't purchase it, well, then you walk out of the store, nothing else happens. If you do purchase it, then you get that book in your hand, which is the fulfillment process, delivery fulfillment process, or it gets sent to your address. And so this is a very basic sales process, easy to understand. From here, let's look at adding a nurture process. So for example, well, if somebody buys something, why don't we get their contact details so that we can put them on a newsletter list, or let them know of other products that they may be interested in. So we start to think about an after sales process and a nurture process for those customers. It's always easier to retain a customer than to get new customers. So adding an after sales process and a client nurture process means that we don't have to spend so much money on lead qualifying, advertising, seminar, social media, etc. And even so the after sales process is if there's a yes here to this purchase, and even if it's a no, before they leave your store, maybe you could convince them to at least give you their email address so that you can contact them further. So you've got these two processes that we're going to add to our basic sales process. And so it starts to look a little bit like this. Sales process tacked on after delivery fulfillment, and then some kind of client nurture process. If they say no, then we put them, we at least try and capture their lead contacts, their contact details for lead capture, and then keep them in some kind of system, which we'd refer to as a lead nurture process. And so let's look at what these nurture processes might look like. And in this particular case, let's consider that they're points of contact via email, but it could be phone calls, or it could be even personal visits, depending on the service that this business offers. So now our basic sales process has become a bit more sophisticated, and it looks like this. And we might also have extra products, thinking about, okay, well, if we have just a main offer, then maybe we also have a free offer, and that free offer might be the means by which we make our lead capture process a bit more persuasive and successive. So we capture more leads because we give them at least something for free in return for their contact details. If we succeed in our goal of selling them our main offer, we might then decide, okay, well, maybe if they're interested in that, having purchased that, they might be interested in a premium offer, and if they're not, then maybe a simplified form of that premium offer. So we're now considering the other offers that we have available in the business and how they might all be brought into the sales process. Okay, so this is a more sophisticated version of our basic sales process. We started from here, very easy to understand, and we are now thinking about extra products, and also keeping in contact with both our clients and our leads. How does this look if we were to try to build a website to provide this kind of service? And now we're starting to look at a diagram that resembles what we started with, but now we can make more sense of it. So for example, we've got our lead qualifying up here at the top left, and that's got three outputs: unqualified leads, qualified leads, and what I've referred to as super qualified leads. And we might send those three categories of leads to different destinations: unqualified leads to our free offer, qualified leads to our main offer, and super qualified leads directly to our premium offer. And these are all dependent on the nature of the business, the strategy that the business owner has in place. So this diagram will differ for different businesses, but this is a generic presentation. I've also used our color coding here to indicate what parts of the WordPress system, specifically the specialist plugins, e-commerce, sales flow, and CRM, what they would do in this expanded system. And as you can see, the CRM is looking after the after sales process, the client nurture process, the emails that go out, and there is a after sales process and a nurture process for this product as well as for this product. And so this is why the diagram starts to look a bit complicated, because you've got all these separate client nurture processes. However, in its simplest form, all of these client nurture processes could be the same. For example, it could just be that after any sale, someone just gets put on the basic newsletter for the business, and that could be the same as the lead nurture process here. So even though these parts of the diagram are shown individually, that's just an option, and they could all be the same process. However, it's worth looking at them individually because it may make sense to invest effort in specializing the sales process depending on the product. And again, that depends on the business. But if we're interested in squeezing out the last drops of efficiency in any process, and if we have the time and the resources to write these emails or put in place these nurture processes, then why wouldn't we? Because it's only going to increase our sales. It's only going to increase the goodwill that the business builds with their clientele. And of course, at every point, we always funnel people towards further offers. So we are almost at the diagram that we started with, but this is how a generic comprehensive sales process would look in the WordPress system, with specialist plugins keeping everything inside the system. Okay, so a couple of things to note here. I have listed, and you may be able to see them here, some of the cloud services that might perform these functions. So just for completeness, for example, the e-commerce could be fulfilled by something like eJunkie. The sales flow could be fulfilled by something like ClickFunnels or Builderall. And then the CRM could be ActiveCampaigns or MailChimp or Keep. My focus, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is to try and keep everything within the WordPress content management system, the one web application. So that's the first thing to note. The other thing to note is that at the very beginning, let's go back to here, one of the key functions that I haven't mentioned since is some kind of lessons or course management system, and that's what I want to get into now, because many websites are now also being used as a learning management system, and that learning management system could be for internal training of staff, but it could be also the offers that business makes to clients, training colleges, schools, etc. And so let's have a look at how a learning management system could be added to this, because there is something specific about adding lessons. My background is as a teacher, and so what I've tried to do here is diagrammatically present something about a course or a sequence of lessons which might be different from a normal offering from a website. And this applies to courses and lessons, and also to membership, in other words, protected content on a website. So this is coming from my background as a teacher and trainer, as well as a web designer. And when I look at what we would normally do for someone on a course, well, we would keep in contact with them. And if, for example, if it was a face-to-face course, on their first lesson, on their first day, we would welcome them. On their last day, we would congratulate them. And so these emails here represent something a little bit more specific than the normal nurturing process, because it's a course, or because we want to encourage users to interact with our content, whether it's a sequenced course or a random access course or just membership content. And so we need to foster that interaction. And we can use a CRM, which is why I'm using this yellow color here, to do that. And we can use email to do that. But of course, as I said before, this email sequence here could be face-to-face contact, or it could be telephone calls, whatever means is used to contact your enrolled students or your members. It could be even social media messaging, for example. So imagining a very simple course here of 4 lessons, then at the end of the first lesson we're welcoming, and at the end of the last lesson we're congratulating, but also at each stage of the course, as the learner progresses through the course, we're sending notification emails to administration and to the course leader. And our CRM is very capable of doing that. And the CRM is also capable of measuring the time progress. So, for example, if a student is taking a long time to progress, or if they seem to be stuck on a particular lesson, then the CRM can flag that to the course leader. And all of this is intended to increase the value of the material to the user or to the learner. It could even feed into a quality management system for the business, so as to highlight parts of the material that are doing very well, and also parts that are not. Okay, so there's notifications to the administrator and the course leader. There's a welcome and congratulations, at the first lesson and last lesson. But also, there may be anticipated issues as the learner progresses through the course, and that's what this box is intended to show: coaching and help to the learner. So, for example, there might be a particularly challenging piece of content delivered here in the second step. That's backed up with an email that encourages the student and also offers mentorship or coaching should they need it. And that's always, as a teacher, that's always good to anticipate in advance rather than wait for the student to get stressed. So this part of the diagram is intended to specifically address the attributes, characteristics of a user going through a course or interacting with protected membership material. And our CRM works really well to that end. So I've made special membership and given a bit of special love to the case of a product on a website in a business being a course or a membership, and so we are now where we started. And so this is an overview diagram of how a content management system such as WordPress can provide a complete sales sales process management, delivering products, and those products can be simple products or they can be complex products. The delivery process of those products is made more efficient, more effective, more successful by good sales funneling methodology using a sales flow plugin, and so landing pages with persuasive text copy. And there's also there's a process of leading a customer on a journey so that when they accept one product, maybe then we can make further offers. And then also, if a sale is made, there is a robust after sales process with a nurture process, and then that leads to further offers. If we don't make a sale at all, then at least perhaps through a free offer we can capture the lead's contacts so that we can put them into a lead nurture process and perhaps bring them back to our main offer afterwards. And then also in the specific case of membership a protected content or a learning management system, we can also use our CRM to interact with the learning management system and increase the value of our content to the learners, and also possibly feed into a quality management system. So here we are at our what looks like a complex diagram, but having gone through this presentation, I hope that it all makes a bit more sense, and it's a little bit easier to understand, and also hopefully you're inspired now to use WordPress to its full extent, because keeping all of these functions within the WordPress content management system is much more cost effective than using some of the cloud services that people typically use. It also means that there is a lesser instance of duplication of data, particularly user data. So keeping it all within one web application has many dividends, and I do have another presentation which goes into that advantage a bit more. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much for listening, and I hope that helps.